Welcome back as we continue our lesson on reflexive verbs. Now that we have an idea of when reflexive verbs are used and what kind of pronouns are used with them, let's get some practice with some specific types of reflexive verbs. First, let's take a look at our vocabulary list. Before I start reading the different words, you'll notice that some of the words have a letter or a couple of letters in a parentheses at the end of them. All of these are an indication that that specific verb is some type of stem changing verb. We've talked about these on past lessons. You might want to review that information if you need to. So if you have a UE in parentheses, that's an indication that that is a O to UE verb. An IE is an E to IE verb, and just an I is an E to I verb. So again, these are stem changing verbs. That means with these verbs, not only will you be changing the endings as you conjugate and making sure your reflexive pronoun matches the subject, but you also need to change the root or the stem of the verb from the original letter to the change, O to UE, E to IE, or E to I. So let's practice some of these specific verbs. Acostarse, a O to UE verb meaning to go to bed. Afeitarse, to shave. Bañarse, to take a bath or to bathe. Cepillarse, to brush either one's hair or one's teeth. Desayunarse, to have breakfast. Despertarse, to wake up, an E to IE verb. Divertirse, to enjoy oneself, an E to IE verb. Dormirse, to fall asleep, an O to UE verb. Irse, to go away. Lavarse, to wash oneself. Levantarse, to get up. Llamarse, to be named or to call oneself. Peñarse, to comb hair specifically. Ponerse, to put on, as we would put on clothing. Quedarse, to stay or to remain. Quitarse, to take off, again talking about clothing. Sentarse, an E to IE verb for to sit down. And vestirse, to get dressed. I like talking about mnemonic devices. What tricks can we use to help us remember some of these words? Can you think of another word in Spanish that you might already know that can help you remember what some of these reflexive verbs mean? Bañarse, to bathe oneself. Where might you do that? Well, you do that in the baño. Cepillarse. If I'm going to brush my hair or my teeth, I'm going to need a cepillo, a brush. Desayunarse, to eat breakfast. Well, you might remember the word for breakfast itself, desayuno. Divertirse. If someone's enjoying themselves, that means they're having fun, or it's divertido. Dormirse, to fall asleep. Where's the best place to do that? Well, in the dormitorio. And vestirse, if I'm a girl, I'm going to dress myself. One thing I might be using is my vestido. Just a few mnemonic devices for a Spanish to Spanish word link. What about a Spanish to English mnemonic device word association? Again, looking at divertirse might be a fun diversion for you to do. With dormirse, another place you might sleep is a dormitory. Levantarse, if you want things to go up, it might levitate. Quitarse, if you're taking off clothing, then you're going to quit wearing it for now. And vestirse, sometimes garments that people used to wear were called vestments. So just a few more mnemonic devices for you. Can you think of other ones that are going to help you remember these verbs? As I talked about in the introduction lesson, some verbs are reflexive at times and not reflexive at others. Lavar is an example. Tú te lavas. You washed yourself. Or tú lavas los platos. You wash the plates. Él se llama Tim. He calls himself, or is called, or is named Tim. Tim llama a su madre. Tim calls his mother. So the question you need to ask if it's reflexive or not is, are the subject and the object of the verb the same person? If they are, it's a reflexive verb and needs to be treated accordingly. So can we practice doing some of these? Remember, sometimes you're going to have a stem changing verb. Sometimes you might not conjugate the verb. You have to remember, is the verb actively being done at that time? And you have to remember to change your reflexive pronoun to correspond to the subject of your sentence. So let's take a try at this. Number 1, they wake up early. Ellos blank temprano. Can you fill in the blank? Ellos se despiertan. Se corresponds to ellos. Despertarse is an E to IE stem changing verb, and it's an AR verb to boot. So an AR conjugation ending, a stem change, and a corresponding reflexive pronoun. Let's try another one. We sit down in class. Nosotros blank en clase. Nosotros nos sentamos en clase. We changed our reflexive pronoun. We put the correct conjugation ending on the end of our verb. And we also remembered that when we have a stem changing verb, it does not change, that stem does not change when we conjugate for nosotros. Again, if you have any questions about stem changing verbs, go back and review that video or that information. Number 3, you call yourself Bob. Tú, Bob. Tú te llamas Bob. She brushes her hair. Ella blank su pelo. Ella se cepilla su pelo. And I am going to go to bed. So my conjugated verb on this one is yo voy a, and then fill in the blank before temprano. I'm not going to conjugate this verb because I'm not actually going to bed yet, but I'm going to go to bed. But I do want to make sure that my reflexive pronoun changes from se to me to correspond to yo, which is the subject of my sentence. So keep practicing your reflexive verbs and your reflexive pronouns.